We'd like to welcome everyone to this month's market update. And as we reflect upon this past year of 2020, it's been quite a wild ride. We've had some all-time highs and some pretty gut-wrenching lows at points. And currently, the markets are reflecting some optimism in areas that were a major concern this year with regards to COVID and potential vaccine, as well as economic policy. And all of this, as mentioned in the past, we expect going forward that the high flying growth stocks, those tech stocks, will be a bit tampered this year, and value stocks will see some rebounds as things return to somewhat normalcy. But not focusing so much on stock markets this month, I want to focus on something that impacts many of you, or at least will impact all of you at some point in time, and that's of required minimum distributions, or RMDs for short. Now, some background on that, many of you are familiar. RMDs are distributions that are required by the IRS out of retirement accounts after you've reached a certain age. And in the past, that age was the year after you reached the age of 70 and a half. Those distributions would begin. But in this past year, because of some recent legislation, according to the Secure Act, that age has been now bumped back to 72. And also on top of that, because of the CARES Act and 2020, RMDs are now waived. So in both senses, individuals might be either or both delayed in taking RMDs or waived altogether this year. But what I want to focus on here as a retirement strategy is how retirees can be proactive in this regard, even taking distributions from an IRA when not legally required to, with the goal of saving future taxes. How so? We're going to run through a few different scenarios, charts to show how being proactive in this regard can add some value from a planning standpoint. So we notice here in our first illustration, an example, set it up, an individual who's about 65 years old with a $500,000 IRA account. Now, as mentioned, this individual isn't required to take distributions until age 72, so about 7 years later. And at that time, that initial distribution will be roughly about $31,000. On the right, we see for single and married tax filers where individuals will hit the next tax bracket. So we see for a single filer, an individual will hit that 22% tax bracket at roughly age 76 on a $500,000 portfolio. And for married filers, that comes much, much later at age 90. That time will reach that 22% tax bracket. So for a single filer with a $500,000 portfolio, we see how quickly one can reach those higher 22, 24, 32% tax brackets. But let's reset this example here and notice what would happen if same age, but the portfolio is $1 million IRA portfolio. So as mentioned, an individual at 65, not required for 7 years until age 72 to begin taking distributions, but immediately for single filers, you're right off into the 22% tax bracket. But within a very short period of time, just a few years later, you're quickly into the 24% tax bracket, and even by age 90, reaching the 32% tax bracket. Now, married filers, similarly, will reach that 22% tax bracket at roughly around 76, and for the most part, will stay in that tax bracket over the life of these RMDs. So for single filers, this has a major impact, especially with larger retirement balances that can quickly, because of compounding of interest, quickly catapult you into those very high tax brackets. So let's reset this though, and now assume that an individual 65, though not required to take distributions from their retirement account, does. They take a modest amount, not currently impacting their tax situation dramatically, roughly the amount that they would be required in that first year. So in our assumption, on $1 million IRA account at age 65, taking roughly around $45,000 When it's required, as the chart begins at age 72, we see single filers are immediately again in the 22% tax bracket. But the delay of 5 years before attaining the 24% tax bracket has substantial savings, and as we see here, may never reach that higher tax bracket in the 32%. So a delay of 5 years keeping you into that 22% before jumping up. Same with the married filers, a delay of about 5 years staying in that lower tax bracket before coming up into the higher tax brackets, the 22, and may even stay in that for the life of the RMDs. So we see taking modest withdrawals now, even though not required, can have a great impact on your tax situation down the road. So the point is not to be overly absorbed with all of these charts and graphs. The point is I want to help you understand, encourage all of you to reach out and speak with me, especially if you're reaching to that point where RMDs may be occurring in the next few years or within the next couple years. I encourage you to reach out to me so we can talk about whether this strategy or another may fit your personal situation, so we can avoid potentially some taxes down the road. So we hope you appreciated this month's market update, and certainly miss all of you meeting you in person. And we hope all of you are safe and secure during this time, and hope to see you all again very soon.